Welcome to 1984 Law, and today we take a brief look at the symbolism surrounding, of all things, Razorblades in the novel. A quick warning before I continue that my thoughts today cover a dark area that I can't directly name without YouTube condemning this video to the memory hole. So if you've been affected by this issue, or are otherwise sensitive to it, then fair warning, I will discuss self-deletion as it's relevant to the subject today. So, though seemingly arbitrary as an item that party members just so happen to lack at that particular time, I think the Razorblade has a deeper significance as a symbol within the book. I believe the item represents free will, given its intended use as a means of self-deletion. Though a rather dark take, nevertheless as we read the book we can see this is obvious. In Part 1, Chapter 5, the canteen scene is important in establishing this connection between the object and free will. Winston explains that many items are routinely in short supply, for example shoelaces, that require party members to venture into the proletarian areas to buy them on the black market. Interestingly, this is a consequence of the party's own deliberate policy of creating scarcity and poverty through the Ministry of Plenty. By underproducing or over-consuming produced goods, particularly within the military sphere, the party creates the economic atmosphere, that is, crushing poverty, that it feels is necessary to help maintain the hierarchical system and hence its own power. That items are scarce at all is a symptom of the ingsoc economy. However, the particular connections that make Razorblades specifically a symbol of freedom are Winston himself and its use as a tool to take the ultimate decision in defiance of the party. Though we can theorise that other characters do have their own minds and heretical thoughts too, we know for a fact that Winston at least does, as well as Julia too later on. Winston, unlike his lover from our perspective, is a constant throughout the novel, at least until the closing chapters, as an individual that is internally in defiance of the party. In Part 1, Chapter 5, we significantly have Winston contrasted with both Syme and Parsons, who both, at least superficially at this stage, are loyal, right-thinking party members. The last point can be endlessly debated. Syme's exact crime and fate is only speculated on by Winston. That he was vaporized, if indeed he even was, does not logically mean Syme was a thought criminal. Indeed, various possibilities exist for him, including escape and self-deletion, as well as the popular theory that he simply vanished to take up a new personality and position within the ranks of the inner party. Parsons, though allegedly shouting "down with Big Brother" in his sleep, was hardly an extreme thought criminal, with many fans doubting he was even one at all. His sycophantic attitude in the cell with Winston suggests that there was little wrong with him from an orthodox perspective. Both Syme and Parsons, therefore, can reasonably be described as orthodox, that is, unfree party members, in contrast to Winston. That Winston possesses Razorblades then, and this item specifically, rather than say shoelaces or soap or any of a million other non-lethal things, is, I believe, no accident. Winston still has a measure of freedom in contrast to the fanatically orthodox Syme and the pathetically supplicating Parsons, which is why he has them and they don't. Orwell makes a point of these two characters asking Winston if he had Razorblades, to which he quickly answers guiltily in the negative. On the act of self-deletion itself, unaliving oneself is the ultimate snub to party power given its near total control over society. With firearms unavailable, using a Razorblade was one of the quicker, if messy, methods by which a party member could end things. Since they were also an item the party reasonably had to allow access to for hygiene purposes, they were a tolerable risk too. I say risk as we know from O'Brien's own words in Part 3 that the party finds it intolerable for any free mind to exist. He explains to Winston that once he is cured of his own insanity, that he will in time be destroyed. Though dark then, unaliving oneself is the ultimate, unanswerable act of free will against the party in this world, the victim forever out of reach. Indeed, Winston confirms as much, describing his own longed-for scenario in Part 3, Chapter 4, in which the party shoots him as his own mind refills with hatred. With that act, he hoped, they would have blown apart their own perfection, with no means to retrieve and cure him once again. That the Razorblade is linked to self-deletion is heavily supported in the law. Winston does explain that many disappearances are in fact self-deletions. Indeed, this is confirmed by at least one case, that of Julia's first lover, who saw to his own demise rather than fall into the hands of the Fort Police. O'Brien, playing his role as a Brotherhood member, states in the meeting scene that sometimes they try to smuggle a Razorblade into the Ministry of Love for use by a captured member. This is one of the few thoughts that dominates Winston's mind in the first hours and days of his incarceration, that he could seize a blade and end it all before the guards could intervene. Interestingly, given the theory here, Winston for some reason thinks that Ampleforth may be the bearer of a Razorblade. Firstly, I find this a bit odd, given that even if this is true, I assume that it would be for both their uses, as if he did possess it with the intent of giving it to Winston, then it surely follows he too is a Brotherhood member, and, given his own situation, he too would have need of it. Are we to believe then that both men, in just a few seconds, could use the object to self-delete before the guards could rush in to stop one or both of them? A second interesting implication, assumed by the first point, is that Winston at least suspects, or is open to the possibility, that the bumbling, hairy-eared poet, as he at one time calls him, could not only be a thought criminal, but a full-blown Brotherhood member too. This too is odd. There's no indication beforehand that Ampleforth has heretical tendencies. So, where is Winston's thought process coming from here? Of course, given his desperate situation, including his rising thirst and hunger, rational thinking would not be natural to him in this context. Whatever the case, Ampleforth too does not possess a Razorblade. Neither does he seem particularly interested in much else other than his own predicament. Like Parsons, in my opinion, his crime was very tame, if he's indeed correct about it. He could not find an appropriate rhyme for rod, other than God, and so left the offending word in a Kipling poem. By the opening of Part 3 then, Winston himself no longer has access to his Razorblades. This relatively quick, if gruesome method of self-deletion is now totally lost to him, and he must now face the Fort Police and months of agony within the Ministry of Love. While in the very earliest chapters, Winston still very much has his so-called inner mind intact, by chapter 4 of Part 3, even this is mostly compromised, with O'Brien commenting that, intellectually, there was little wrong with him. With his final breaking in Room 101, his last emotional barrier to the full destruction of any free will he had was gone. So that was my take on Razorblades within the novel. They're a symbol of the ultimate expression of free will within Orwell's nightmare world. But what do you think? Are Razorblades simply arbitrary objects within the book, having no symbolic significance at all? Let us know in the comments, and remember, Big Brother is watching you.